Hey, what's going on, everyone, and welcome to the Deceptilab, and welcome to Volume 2 of my series, The Art of War. And today we are going to talk about power cores and combat bots. Try to figure out which ones will be the best pairing for your war teams. And this is the follow-up to my live stream last week, and it's also the follow-up to Volume 1, which we talked about team build a little bit. So I'm trying to transition into a couple of different phases so you guys can try to get those war teams squared away. So a couple of topics we'll look at today, but first let me get set up, and I will be right back. All right, everybody. And so here we are on the battlefield, and I'm actually using my normal account, my live account today, and we are going to talk about offensively some of the power cores that you should be using. So we're going to go talk about, like I said, the cores first, and I actually got a list of some of the ones that I use on my war team that never leave my war team, and we'll talk about that in a moment. Um, but one thing I want to talk about is you always want to use your power cores to the strengths of your bot. And so I'll start off with an example talking about our air class bots. For me, and I probably need to do a little bit of fuse a few cores here, but I always want to play it to the bot strengths. And so for me, if I got an air class bot, I love to use that enhanced ordnance core because I feel like its primary purpose is going in and get that additional damage, um, just through the special ability. And so here you can see one of my raid bots that I use, Cybertron Starscream, and I use him, for his stun in the raids a lot. But he's actually got pretty good damage, even as a 4-star. So I put him the EO on him to get that extra 26.5%. And that's one of the ones that I use heavily. Likewise, I like to use the volatile mixture for my gunners. Depending on a few things, a couple different scenarios we'll talk about. I do try to keep one of each particular core. We'll talk about that in a little bit as well. But ideally, I keep 1 to 2 of the major cores that I feel like are going to be relevant for that bot class. Um, We'll go through a couple of examples as we go through, but those two that I really like to point out, the volatile mixture and the enhanced ordnance, just to make sure that I can get the maximum amount of damage that I want to get out of those bot special abilities. So we'll talk about a couple of different things. Also, we'll talk about which ones work well in the current meta, and we can actually flip over to my war team. If you guys haven't seen it already, I actually just ran a video earlier today, and as part of a content creator challenge, and it was talking about our war team. So basically, a bunch of unofficial creators decided to get together and say, hey, let's do a video, edit it up, and show your war teams. So if you hadn't seen that, check it out. I actually ran it this morning. All right, so when you look at my war team, the first one is Blot. I'll be honest with you, from uh, from a power core standpoint and the combat standpoint, I'm still not 100% in on this particular bot, and we'll talk about that in a little bit. But this is what I'm using right now. I'm using the Micronus core, which is one of the cores that I feel will never actually leave my team. Well, never, I'm not going to say never. This is one that I'm always trying to get on my war team. And so I've actually got a graphic that shows which ones are my must-have power cores. And so there's 5 of them that I mentioned, and I'll go through all of the details about why here in a second. But I always want to have the Amalgamous Prime core on there. I always want to have the Quintus Prime core. And do in the current meta, if you're Cybertron League or Prime League, um, I feel like Nexus is one of those ones that we want to use. And then, as I already talked about, the enhanced ordnance is a good one, and Micronus is a good one to use as well. So those I try to keep on my team, with a few exceptions, which we'll talk about here on the battlefield. All right, so we were just looking at Blot. So we'll talk about that Micronus first. So for Micronus, what we have is an opportunity to heal just different bots, and it's one of those cores that you can use to help the entire team as a whole. For me, I want to get I, the focus. I want it to be on someone that's going to stay in the middle of the pack. Blot actually gets out a little bit too far from me at times. It does help a little bit. Like if I use instead of double crosser, I use Fangtron, then it does help a little bit. But it's one of those things that I'm working through. Obviously, this is the newest bot to my war team, and I'll get it figured out how I want to leave that long term. But the reason why I use this is because for the longest time, and I'll tell you a quick story. When I first got to my current family, I'm over there with the Horde and the Horde and Defiant little Horde, and I was getting some help from just had some good mentorship over there. And one of the things they were telling me is like when my team wasn't as powerful as it needed to be, they told me to focus on getting a 5-star healer, which I wound up getting Hook shortly thereafter that, and that worked out well. Hook is still on my war team, but what I needed was the double healers to try to keep everybody alive until the team was a little bit stronger, and so I used the double healers while I needed it. Um, as my team got stronger and as the meta started changing, I didn't need double healers as much because there were more combats that came in with additional healing, and I started using that as my primary source of healing, which we'll talk about and we'll show in a little bit. Um, so when you got combats like Singe and Pinpointer, Fracas and Nightstick, or even if you get a Scout class, and I say that because that's an unofficial class in the game, Heartburn and Triceratops Shot will also provide healing, and you can realistically use the 4-star and the 5-star of each of those combats to try to provide your healing, and so it reduces your need to depend on double healers, traditional healers, and you can use Micronus core to kind of augment. All right, so let's also take a look at the rest of my war team, and we'll talk about those ones that are on my list. And so the power core that was on my list was the Amalgamous Prime core, and realistically speaking, this core is a must-have on my team just because for any of your bots, if you look at Impactor, who I have him equipped to now, he's got good damage and he's got good health. His special ability has great damage as well at the ability 11. You can also get a little bit of AoE damage from the explosions. And with his health, with him being maxed out, level 67 at 35, 400 in terms of health, uh, this is Amalgamous Prime Core is a way to keep him on the battlefield and keep him from, you basically just got healing at your demand whenever you use his ability to get him back up to health. And so one of the things that you probably saw if you saw my video I was talking about that I made earlier today was just showing my war team. Impactor is one of those bots that he's always healthy on my war team, and he doesn't die. I use him to solo level other bots at a lot of times. All right, so we talked about him in the Amalgamous Prime core. We got Nemesis Prime. And Nemesis Prime is one of the few bots where I'll actually use a G1 core. His G1 allows you to make yourself and a target 62% faster, obviously with his ability 1. So for those of you that use Nemesis Prime and Hot Rod, he's one of those bots that you can get protection from, and you can also get a speed boost for you and a teammate, which typically with Nemesis Prime I pair him up in a gunner so that the gunner can become a lot faster. So that helps you rip through bases a lot quicker. Now, another prime core that I didn't mention on my list because for me it's very situational, but it does work very well in this particular pairing, is the Alchemist Prime core. And so typically you use this on a bot that if you have a lot of DPS, then you want to use it. But here's the key. With the Alchemist Prime core, you get that 15% healing on a maxed out Alchemist core. Um, for your normal damage and your ability damage. So when I use knockout, one of the things you see, and I'll actually run the example real quick. One of the things that you'll see when you run knockout is that knockout's ability, while I still believe currently that it's still a little bit broken, um, it's not going to change when knockout does receive a damage reduction at some point, because essentially right now it's running higher than the tooltip. So I'll go into zone 14 with knockout and impactor, and we can actually take a look at both of those bots and their abilities with their power cores. So with impactor, as I start, and you see he's already taken some damage, and what I'll just do is I'll run his ability, and you're going to see that he's going to stay around full health, and then I'll drop in knockout, and what he does is he's going to have that wall damage for his ability, but if he does take any damage, he can heal himself through the use of the Alchemist Prime core anytime he's using his ability. Like I said, a huge part of my strategy with the power cores and the combats is keeping my bots healthy and keeping them from taking a lot of damage. Impactor's got us with plenty of ability points, and then if I take any damage at all, I'm trying to get him to actually take some damage so you can see it go down so you can see his ability go down. But when you use that Alchemist Prime core, that health fills right back up on knockout. So as you can see, with the use of the Amalgamous Prime core and the Alchemist Prime core on these two bots, they basically finished the battle with full health, which is if you're going looking at that from a war aspect, that's absolutely perfect and what we're looking for. All right, so going on and continuing to look at my war team bots, one of the ones that we're going to look at, and one of the few G1 cores that I use, I got Brawl on my team. Brawl's G1 is giving me fire damage. And when we were talking about the team build in Volume 1, one of the things that I was mentioning was building your team around healing. Brawl is one of the couple of bots. Brawl and Nemesis Prime are two of the bots that I have on my team that don't have any source of individual healing. For one of them, I plan to rectify that by getting the 5-star fracas, and that's nightstick for you guys on the Autobot side. And I'll show you what it is that I'm actually dealing with. I've saved up a bunch of 5-star combat chips, and so I've got a really good shot at getting fracas. So I don't want to do it while it's still a batch of 9, but when you look at my combat chips, you can see that I've got enough here. I got enough for 4 pulls right now. I hadn't got all my stuff from Cyber Pass yet, as far as 5-star combat chips, and who knows what comes up in the next events between now and next saga. Between now and the time that I get to the point in the next saga where I can actually pull fracas. And so yeah, the goal here is to go in there and pull him using up to 4 pulls that I have when the batch breaks down. So I got 80% odds there. I'll use that to, more likely I'll probably put fracas on Nemesis Prime, and I'll let Brawl continue to roll with Fireline. But so I'll have multiple sources of healing on that team. Now, one of the other Prime cores that I was talking about was the Quintus Prime core. Now, this one has been a source of argument with me and a lot of other players in the community for quite some time now, because what I've done here is I use Singe, who we'll talk about combats in a little bit, but Singe is going to give me an element of healing for Cutthroat, who already has decent health, well, great health for Air Class Bot. He also does a decent amount of damage for Air Class Bot, and he also can protect himself and teammates with his special ability, the Smoke Bomb. So for those of you who are using Cutthroat tracks, um, this Quintus Prime Cool and Singe pairing works really well. The problem is a lot of people will tell you to use this on certain bots. Like a lot of people use it on Soundwave and Blaster, the Quintus Prime Cool on those bots. And not saying that it doesn't work. It works very, very well actually. And that had become the meta for quite some time. But one thing that I ran into is I had a buddy of mine who had recently got Cutthroat, and one of the things that he did, he was like, "Hey, Freeze, run a test for me and see, because I like your." He was interested in my combat pairing, Singe and Quintus Prime, and he was wondering, does that work? Does Singe work along with does Singe work along with Quintus Prime in terms of getting additional damage and additional healing from the sharks, which we discovered it does. For me, I didn't want to overthink it. You know, I numbers crunch, but I'm not a huge numbers crunch where if I go up there and I go run something and test and I see that it's working, I'm not going to say, oh man, I'm not going to use this combo because everyone's telling me the meta is to use a different combo. Realistically speaking, the Singe and Quintus combo actually provides more healing than the Terrordaxtyl combo and Terraxodon. That's the pairing that people typically use. And we'll talk about that a little bit more in a bit. Okay, let's see. All right, so one of the other power cores that I was talking about, I love to have me a good EO core. In this case, Blastoff's G1 core actually does both functions. It does the function of the exact same damage as an enhanced ordnance core we saw earlier that was 26 and a half. One of the biggest complaints I had when in testing when we were working on this core is that they had it doing less damage than an enhanced ordnance core. But if you looked at volume 1 of this Art of War series, one of the things that I was talking about was making sure that you had a one-shot kill bot. Now, one of the things I want to say is that people have a tendency to kind of overreact to things, like when the apes are saying that one shot kill is not going to be a thing anymore. Yeah, you're not going to go take your bots and one shot kill the MDS, I feel like, when it eventually gets upgraded. But you are going to be able to one shot kill some of your weaker defenses. Um, so, and it's also a thing like one thing I want to talk about later on in this series is the battle boost. White Crimzik is one of the ones that works really, really well for still allowing you to try to get some of your one shot kill damage in, depending on what bots you have and what level they're at. So in this case, this G1 core is replacing where I would normally use my enhanced ordnance, and I was able to take that core and transfer it over to Cybertron Starscream. And then lastly, one of the cores that I had on my list was actually on my healer. I use Hook for my healer, and I use the Nexus Prime core on him because, let's be honest, all of the rest of my bots have cores that they need that are gonna be used essentially for healing. Now with Hook, I use the Nexus Prime core because I know I'm gonna do everything I can to keep my healer alive, and there is a part of the Nexus Prime core that most people don't talk about, and it's kind of hard to see on this screen because the tooltip is so long. But essentially, Nexus Prime works in two parts. One of it is if you deploy the bot before the combiner, then your combiner is going to get a boost, and then you're also going to have your entire team is going to have additional damage against the opposing combiner. And that's important because the last three sets for Cyber and Prime League players, they've had increased combiner health, and so the combiner is just sitting there. The defending combiner comes out of the COP, and he's just sitting there and it's just taking forever to get him down. And so I started using the Nexus Prime core to just get them down faster. And that was one of those cores that I won't part with. I was having a conversation with a player recently where they were saying, well, should I use, should I use, you can see up here, I got this ray booster. Yeah, you can if you want to get additional healing, because like I already mentioned, you want to try to go capitalize on anything that already makes your bot good. And for Hook, he's got really, really good healing. So you could use array boosters to get more healing, or you can use this Nexus Prime core so your whole team is getting damage, more damage. Since the healing on my particular team has already been addressed, I choose to use the Nexus Prime core instead. All right, so some other things I want to talk about. Let's talk about some of the common power core mistakes. And I'll probably take a, let me see, I'll probably run my entire war team while I do that. So I'll just Quan real quick and I'll take them into a battle while we talk about that. And I'm actually going to jump out of the screen because I don't want to try to play with my wireless mouse. And that just makes me kind of on the slow side. All right, so some common power core mistakes I see. I see a lot of people they just use power cores just because they have them. And I just always feel like that's a kind of a bad idea if it doesn't fit your team. So a lot of people will use certain things just because, well, hey, I have the gmetal, I need to use it. Well, not necessarily. Not if it's a core that doesn't fit well with the meta and doesn't fit well with your team. You also have, and I probably shouldn't have went for the combiner there. I didn't really have to, but I'm just kind of messing around, so bear with me. But it's a good example of how that Nexus Prime core can actually wear down. Now it's really tough. Every time I see Omega Supreme in the outpost, it's actually really tough to bring them down. I actually got them down there in less than 30 seconds, so that's good. But you can see one of the things you want to concentrate on is how healthy. Now I did bad deployment on this and everything, but you can see health wise, my team is doing fantastic health wise right now. If they didn't, Cutthroat can go down there, throw a smoke bomb down, and I'll get some additional protection. The healing will start to help out. If that doesn't work, then I can go use Nemesis Prime's ability to try to keep us, um, whatever bot is lagging behind, I can keep him from taking excessive amounts of damage. And, you know, the bases come down like that. Granted, this is only zone 15, but look at my war team right now. Every single bot, if you looked at their power on their health meters, was full of health. And it works similarly to me when I'm in wars. The only difference is in the wars, obviously the bases are a little bit more difficult, but I'm not really panicked about it because all of my bots, for the most part, have a source of healing, with the exception of Nemesis Prime and Nemesis Prime and Brawl. But Nemesis Prime can protect himself and Brawl, and then Hook only has to share the healing usually between those two bots. All right, so we were talking about mistakes that I see with with power cores. A lot of people just not looking at their overall team synergy. Like I said, just because you have a particular just because you have a particular power core doesn't mean you have to use it. And another thing I'm starting to see a lot of lately, even in really, really competitive teams, I'm starting to see players not even know what what a particular power core does. Um, Honestly, guys, if you don't know what it does, just ask someone, man. So it's a couple of ways you can go about it. You can ask a teammate, ask us content creators. You know, most of us are here because we like to help folks. And you can also, like, there's a ask the VIPs chat for some of you newer players. You can go in there and do that on Discord. There's a lot of resources that you can use. Another thing that I've seen the habit of, I've seen people max out really, really bad power cores um, that you're not ultimately not going to use in war. And you can kind of see up here how I have. Actually, I want to go to my gunner class real quick. you can see how I've got a flak jacket, and like I said, I try to keep one of every type of power core. But you know, you're getting reduced damage from mortars and missile launches. Now, I will say this can be helpful because mortars do have the target protocol power core equipped in a lot of cases, and so if you're getting reduced damage from that, survivability becomes, it becomes a thing. It becomes something that can help you. But that's not the strong suit of your gunner. The strong suit of it is to have high damage, nice abilities that can do high damage as well. And so I try to go more for the volatile mixture in that case. Um, and one thing that I also see people doing lately, make sure you test everything out. Now, you can test it out in the early phases. You don't got to max it out right away, even though it is much easier to max out cores than it has been in the past. But one of the things that I like to do, I like to test everything out to see how it's going to go. If you can catch Space Ape on their live stream, or if you can catch some of us YouTubers, so you can kind of get a visual for how it works. I advise that as well. But I try to keep one of each core, and when I get around to it, I actually max out one of each core. Um, like even something like when you go to your warrior class, I don't have like an actual. Where did it go? I got a wall buster in here somewhere. Actually, that's universal. That's why. And that I need to max out. Um, and I think I got a 50-50 chance of getting Straxus out of there in the pool. Now it'll probably be when I go use Wall Buster. But even for certain bots, like if walls ever become like too much of a problem, I got a wall busting bot and knockout. I could equip that on him. I did it during testing and it worked pretty well. So just one of those things to keep your eye on. All right, let's see. Go through my notes real quick. Oh, so I got a story I want to tell real quick um, about fusing cores um, and just getting rid of cores when they aren't in the current meta. And this is actually more about defense in the particular story that I'm going to tell. But one of the things that I did with the laser turrets is back when the anti-air core was very, very popular because a lot of people were just using the air class to attack HQ. I had got some bad advice from one of my mentors at the time. They told me I didn't really need the laser ricochet, and their rationale was um, basically talking about the reduced damage. And they say, oh, okay, well, it's going to bounce from one target to the next. It's before laser ricochet got really popular. And so I fused about, I think it was 2 or 3 laser ricochet G metals that I had. This is the reason why I say I keep one of each. And if it on defensively, one of I keep it so I can have one of each core for every defense that I have available. So in this case, I would have 4 of these for my laser turrets if I had those laser ricochets. I do the same thing offensively. The difference is on offense, I'm probably only going to use one of each core. So I might keep 2 for certain cores, like especially for my gunners, just in case, because now I run 2 gunners, so it might become a time where I need to go run 2 of those power cores, but I don't try to keep all of them. So be careful when you're fusing your G metals. Make sure that you have enough for if the meta changes. All right, so moving on, we're going to talk about our combat bots. And you already saw the combat bots that I have on my war team. And one thing I want to emphasize, and we talked about this in volume 1 of the Art of War series, is that you want to think about your team build. And so for me, my team build consists of trying to make sure that I have healing all the way around throughout every layer of my war team. But one of the things we talked about in volume 1 was having a lot of ranged bots. Ideally, you're going to have 2 to 4 ranged bots, whether they be traditional gunners or whether they be um, what they call junners, which is going to be your air class that you make turn into a makeshift gunner. And so, from a combat standpoint, what you're going to see is you're going to see players use bots like in this case with Cutthroat. On Cutthroat I don't use it, but I've had the option of using Crater Maker with him. I've used Fireline with him, just so you can get the decent range. I decided to go more for the healing in that particular case. But what you see is that with a bot like Nemesis Prime, I put my 5-star Crater Maker on him so that I could extend his range. And part of that is because he does have really good damage. I still need to get him up to level 67 on this account. But as I do, he's going to have well over, um, well, I'll probably add Fracas to him so he get the damage boost at some point, like I was saying. But he'll have well over 1,000 DPS, which is going to be really helpful for my teams. Um, so that's the key things you want to look at for your combats is trying to get your range and also trying to get your DPS. And so for me, Crater Maker, I use heavily. I still use Fireline, and I want to clear up any confusion about the whole Fireline thing because I know a lot of people after about recently at the end of 2022, Space 8 said, "Hey man, we're gonna go adjust Fireline and Top Shot back to the tooltip." Um, you still can't beat the range that you get. Like when you look at the range that you have, when you have Fireline equipped, it's always going to say, it changes for bot class, but you put it on the gunner, it says extra long. A couple others, it'll say that you have extra long range. That becomes really important because it protects you from a lot of attacks up front, and you can let your warrior class, you can let your um, special class bots that have higher health points take that damage so that your gunners and your junners don't have to. And so the range thing becomes really, really important. When it comes to combats, one of the things, if you guys followed my content for a while, it's 2 videos I have out that really break down how I feel about the combats. One of them is I have a top 10 combat video. I I think I can go back in and add that link to the description of this video. And as far as Fracas and Nightstick go, I actually got a video, a con highlight video for Fracas, telling you why Fracas is so valuable and why I'm hunting them so bad. So those 2 videos actually kind of give you a lot of insight on how I view combat bots. One that I do want to talk about here is I actually have on Impactor. I love Vertebrake, and I've gotten into some arguments with players in the community over Vertebrake. I actually share a story real quick, but I was talking to some players in one of my former alliances, and one of the things that they were saying was that, um, well, we don't need Vertebrake anymore because warrior class bots have stun immunity from the Titan tech tree, which is 100% true. My counter argument is this: if you want to not get stunned, why would you not want to have 2 bots not get stunned? With warrior class bots, especially the rush in types, they already get affected by FFD, or the force field disruptor power cores, for those who aren't familiar. I just see value in a bot like Impactor coming in, and if I had a warrior class bot, right now I'm using Blot, so it's not really as applicable, even though it does help that he doesn't get stunned. So now I can start off my attacks with 2 bots that don't get stunned. So that means if Chromia and Fellbatter waiting around in the outpost or something, I got 2 bots that I can use to try to take that turret out before I get to the point that I drop the rest of my team. If Scourge and Swoop are out there, same thing applies. I can kind of do some pathing with Impactor while that's happening. And even though I will say Vertebrake doesn't always work consistently on Swoop's attack, so that's one thing you do have to be careful about. But if I got an opportunity to not be stunned with 2 different bots and I can get the damage done that faster, that's the route that I'm going to take. Um, and with that said, one of the things that I always advise people, don't overthink your strategy. 2 bots that don't get stunned, it's better than 1 bot that's not getting stunned, especially when your 1 bot that you're using is Impactor, and he's, or whoever you use. If you use I use this same pairing on like our Armada Megatron and LOP. Same thing applies because you can use them to clear out huge sections of the base and not worry about them getting stunned. All right, let's see what else. Let me look at my notes. But yeah, like the key thing that I want you guys to take away is, for me personally, I like to use combats that heal. So Fracas, Nightstick, Singe, and Pinpointer. If you got a Scout class bot, Heartburn and Triceratops shot, who I'm not particularly a huge fan of, but I also don't use Scout class bots that heavily. And then you use that in a combination with power cores that heal, such as the Amalgamous Prime core that we have in here pictured. Now, some common mistakes that I've seen with combat bots. Uh, the biggest one that I see is, honestly, people will use their combat bots and start maxing out combat bots that aren't that good just because they have them. Oh, I got the 5-star, so I gotta use it. I'll be honest with you, personally, I went through some combat bots. Now, the legacy one isn't that bad. That you can see that's the majority of what I have. But when I look at a bot like, even like combat bot like Catgut, while useful, he's not a bot that I use in every single war attempt. Like I do run sack strategy sometimes with Ramjet, and because I only use it sometimes because of how infrequent I use it now, I only got him at level 6, which I put him at level 6 because it's better than the maxed out 4-star that I had right next to him. You can see I got a maxed out blowpipe up there on a 4-star, up there on, looks like that's one of my Cybertron star screams. But those are mistakes that I made by just maxing out 4-star combat bots that I wasn't going to always use in war. You can see I got Shroot down there at level 9. I never thought it was going to be a reason why I wouldn't use Shroot, but then I started, I started using, other combats on my healers. I started using, and we didn't talk about that, but if you look at my hook on my war team, I actually started trying to get additional damage out of my minion combats. And in this case, I get additional damage from Roller Force, and I get a speed up ability for the entire team. So anytime I can do something that's going to help the entire team, I'm always going to take that opportunity. So when Roller Force came out, when working properly, man, that's a good place for me to stick him. I can stick him on a healer because I don't have to take away any of my healing that I'm doing with the rest of my team. Other combat bot mistakes that I see commonly, um, like I already mentioned, numbers crunching too hard. And the thing that I always tell people when I'm advising them is, just because something isn't the most effective doesn't mean that it's ineffective. And what I mean by that is, team synergy is important. And so I'm not going to move a combat just so I can try to squeeze out a couple more DPS or squeeze out a couple more health points. And ultimately, it makes the rest of my team worse. Like in my case, with my war team, the team is very balanced. The healing is there for every coming from every direction. The damage is coming from every direction. It's a very, very balanced war team. Whereas I got decent range bots and I got decent bots up front to soak up some of the damage. And then the other thing I say with numbers crunching too hard is sometimes people get the numbers wrong. So just make sure that when you're getting advice from anybody that you actually, like I said earlier, check it out yourself and make sure that you're getting the correct numbers. And the last thing I want to show you guys before I get out of here is I got a graphic that I want to go to that actually shows all of your prime cores. Now, this particular chart, I've gotten criticism from players in the community before because, to be honest, this is a really, really old graphic. It came out when, essentially, when prime cores had just come out. But a lot of the stuff is still applicable because now the ratings on here I completely ignore. But it tells you what each prime core does and it gives you con suggestions. Now this one I only have the Decepticon one. There's also an Autobot one around. I'm sure if I go look in useful content, I probably could find it. But I think the thing that throws people off is it gives specific bot names on these sheets, and there have been more bots to join the game since then. Um, so this is where thinking in concepts becomes really, really important. Just because if somebody told me, like, when this was out, there was no Impactor, there was no Armada Megatron, but when I started using a core like Amalgamous, one of the things that I realized is, oh, well, what they're saying is to use it on a bot that stays in its alternate mode for long periods of time. So I used to use it with Sentius Malice, Sentius Malice, you know, when he was part of the meta. And when the meta started to change, I said, okay, well, Impactor's stronger. I'll use it on him. Or if I had a Armada Megatron LOP, I'd use it on him. It works just as well. And one of the things that I see from players is they'll get the G1 core for Armada Megatron or LOP, and they'll use that and won't use, because, once again, numbers crunching, they'll use that as opposed to Amalgamous, which is going to give him his health, and he's still going to have a good damage boost. So really just kind of weigh the good and the bad when you're using your prime cores, or any power core for that matter, to make sure that you are getting the best you can from a team synergy standpoint. But all right, guys, let's head back to the lab. And in closing, I just want to say uh, thanks you guys for participating and watching this series. I got a lot of positive feedback on the series so far after volume one. I, and I got a couple of I'll be honest, I got a couple of dislikes also, and I imagine because everybody approaches wars differently. Um, I kind of wish the people that left the dislikes also left comments, so maybe it's something I could think about for future videos. So, good or bad, drop me a comment, and if you like the content, as always, give it a like. And but yeah, basically, this series is about giving basic info because I see a lot of people missing a lot of the basics when they are approaching team builds, power cores, combat bots, so on and so forth. But in any event, look out for. So this series is going to have a total of what I think is going to be a total of 5 volumes. Volume 3, we're going to start to talk about actual attacks. So we're going to start looking at bot deployment and combiner deployment. And so look forward to seeing that probably sometime next week. I think I'll go work on it this weekend. And yeah, so I will see you then, and I will see you on the battlefield. Freezius out.